We had a house fire 2 years ago, and we wanted to talk about our reflections on how that impacted us.
Yeah, well, I think it's been a big shift because our old house was very old. Not it was not super fancy. Things broke down all the time.
It's about the polar opposite of super fancy.
Yeah, but I think that's something that I think that's the reason why we really loved our old house is that it wasn't for the purpose of it wasn't for other people, right? It was for ourselves. We had a lot of freedom, to as kids we would draw on the walls and
As little kids.
as little kids, we literally had a wall for drawing on.
Yeah, a designated wall
Yes.
for drawing on.
It was not very beautiful, but there was just a lot of freedom for us to do things like we had hardwood floors on the first floor, and for a while, Isla and our morning routine was
to get our scooters and scooter right on the hard
around
floor.
in circles. And we were joking, like, we need to do that enough so that we literally have a groove for our scooters. And it's like, it's not how you take care of hardwood floors, but I think it's an indication as to how we were able to really use that space to enjoy ourselves. We constantly had made forts like all the time, everywhere. It was, our bed was a fort, our closet was a fort, the office was a fort, the basement was a fort.
The majority of my room was a fort.
Yes, it was half the room.
We even made a music video about it.
Yeah, we did. Lost laptop. It was not about any kind of virtue signaling other than we really like forts, I guess.
Yeah.
But a lot of our furniture and clothes and stuff was all from the thrift store because just like why not? Like it's not.
Yeah, well, I mean, since our house was pretty old, then that immediately set the standard of like this house is for us. And we don't need to impress anyone with it. So we can just go all out in the extreme and just have the best time of our lives and have so much fun. Like the giant cardboard castle that my dad made with multiple floors and a slide that we had a whole lot of fun with that, like reenacting Monty Python.
Well, there was a metal bookshelf. And then there was like some wooden planks so that there was 2 floors, and then there was a slide coming down, and you could get up to the second floor with a ladder. And in Monty Python, there's a scene where there's this French guy.
I fart in your general direction.
Yeah, he's like looking down on them from this castle, and we reenacted that scene. It was hilarious.
I demand that you let me into that castle.
I fart in your general direction. Your mother will have stolen your father all the bales.
What strange people.
You also had a birthday party where all your friends dressed up in princess dresses and went down the slide in the castle. That was great.
Anyway, the point is we had a lot of fun, and we did our very best to make use of that house.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just think that there has been an extreme shift in terms of just the amount of abundance we have in today's world, where now we just have as much food as you want, as much stuff that you want, as much entertainment that you want from devices. And now in this world of so much abundance, what does that actually mean? Because we know that if you just learn about human psychology, if you're in the state of looking at materialistic possessions as something that will bring you happiness, you kind of get on this hedonic treadmill of like, oh, I want this now, and then if I get this, then it'll make me happy. Then when you get it, then there's always the next thing. And I think that it's be very difficult to I think break out of that kind of materialistic mindset because it's everywhere. Like it's literally, you just see people doing these things that indicate that they value material possessions all the time. And I think that when it comes to our new house, we have this big box house. Like, it's literally just a giant box.
Yeah. Well, after the house burned down, it just made the most sense economically to just get the house with the most square feet so that it has the
maximize
most value.
Resale value. So now we have this giant house, and for us to get a small house, it would literally be more expensive to custom build a smaller house. Like, all the out of the box standard houses in this area are humongous. So it's not really, you know, of course we're not going to spend extra money on a smaller house. But when it comes to just kind of the potential downsides of this modern abundance, because, you know, I think you see that there is this correlation between an increase in wealth in especially developed countries, and certain trends like loneliness and isolation, because I think one thing that people have noticed is just that, like, you can, with an increase in wealth, you have an increased ability to isolate yourself, right? And back, like, if you don't have insurance, for example, or standard things like, you know, when our house burned down, we called the 911, the fire department came, and then, you know, we were working with the people at Red Cross. They gave us some Red Cross blankies and stuff, and, you know, we insurance was able to help us out, and before we had this modern infrastructure, you had to rely on relationships in your community, right? If you didn't have a good relationship with your neighbors in that situation, like, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that...
You're on your own.
Yeah. And so because of that, you're able to isolate yourself more because you're not really reliant on other people as much for these things. And especially you see more and more people not living with their extended family, you know, moving to different cities. And so because of that, with increased wealth, you do see increased loneliness oftentimes. So I think that that was something that was a big concern for us when moving into a big house, is like, you know, now we're going to be able to isolate ourselves even more. Even in the old house, Isla and I, we had separate rooms, but I would sleep in your room.
Yeah.
Right? Because, you know, I didn't want to be all alone on the first floor. And it was, you know, something that I was, like, intentionally just like, hey, I have my own room, but I don't want to isolate myself just because I can. And with a even bigger house, it's just even more easier to isolate yourself.
It might seem like, oh, we're spending time together because we're in the same house, but if you're in different rooms the whole time, you're not having that social engagement, and you might think, big deal. Well, yes, it is a big deal, because humans are social beings, and if you don't have that social interaction, it causes a whole lot of terrible things, like, I don't know, depression, you know? Yeah. It's like, oh, why is the amount of loneliness in the U.S. so much higher than other developed countries? It's because in India, you're not going to see these giant houses. You're going to see these tiny houses with, like, 10 people living in them. Yeah. It's very, very hard to be isolated when you're squished in a house with 9 other people.
Yeah. When you're sleeping in a room with, like, 8 other cousins.
Exactly.
Like, you're not
you
going to
feel
be
very
lonely.
Connected.
Yeah.
And obviously there are downsides to that. Like, it's probably going to be a lot harder to get productive work done. That's why we isolate ourselves in the first place, is like, oh, I'm going to be alone so that I can get my work done.
It's more convenient.
Yeah.
But I think that, you know, a lot of people have asked us, like, oh, how are you liking the new house? Like, isn't it so great? And
we've gotten that question so many times.
Yeah. And it's like, honestly, we are, and we have been very
terrified.
Yeah, because we're very aware of these risks. And we, you know, just thinking about all of those things when moving in here, we were very cognizant about, like, hey, we don't just because we have this big house, we don't want to become attached to that. Yeah. You know, we don't want to be, we don't want that to change ourselves and our own understanding of what's valuable, because one thing that we talk a lot about is basically convenient beliefs, that it's very easy to believe certain things that would favor you and your environment and your situation, of like, oh, if I'm pretty, then you're going to value looks more. If you're rich, you're going to value money more, because it's going to it's just going to be easier for you to feel better about yourself if you believe
if
those
you're
things.
rich and you believe that what makes people valuable is that they're rich, then you're very valuable all of a sudden.
Yeah, and so because of that, it's just you want to be very just cognizant about what is convenient for me to believe, and to question those beliefs. And for us to be in a big fancy house, it would be very convenient for us to start to value that more, and we wanted to be very intentional about pushing against that. And especially about also ensuring that we're having genuine connections, and we're pushing back against the the isolation and the loneliness that can come with being in a bigger house, where we had our grandparents live with us for 2 months, and we're just constantly having people visit and coming in and out of the house who are friends.
Well, that's why we're starting a mini micro school in our basement.
Yeah, and so I think it's an opportunity for us to use the space in a way where if it was smaller, we wouldn't be able to have as many people here. And, of course, there are some conveniences that come with being in this space, but I think it's also something that we really want to be aware of the risks that come with what we view as luxuries, right? It's a trap in some sense of like it looks so appealing, and once we get it, it can start to, I think, pollute our minds if we're not careful.